The first road-going car to hit 200 miles per hour was the famed Ferrari F40 in 1987. Or was it? You see, this is where history gets it wrong, because 3 years earlier, in 1984, this rather strange-looking Pontiac Trans Am that you see here actually was not only able to break the 200-mile-per-hour barrier, but it was able to do it for just over 60 grand in 1984 money, which was a mere fifth of the cost of the Ferrari F40 that came a few years later. So what the hell is this car, and how was this space-age Firebird able to become the first production car to ever reach 200 miles per hour? To understand that, we need to dive into the state of mind that Pontiac's upper-level brass was in when they decided to greenlight this patently insane project. By the early 1980s, Pontiac was in need of some help. The era of exciting Super Duty Trans Ams and the GTOs were replaced with cars like the Sunbird. The once mighty arm of GM needed a stem cell injection in the form of performance to save it from becoming irrelevant. Internally, GM was busy in the background working on launching the Pontiac Fiero, which would be a radical new offering in the form of an affordable sports car. But it wasn't a halo car by any means. Pontiac needed something that dropped jaws from Memphis to Maranello. They needed their own supercar, something that would awe people and get them associating the Pontiac brand with high performance once again. A project like this, though, would have cost a fortune and would never have been able to be done inside the walls of GM with all the cooks and take and being honored in their way. Pontiac had to go outside their own umbrella to make this dream a reality, and they enlisted the help of a little-known company called Knudsen Automotive to do just that. Strangely, though, the company that Pontiac put their faith in to build this new world-beating Firebird had never actually made a performance car. Knudsen initially got their claim to extremely minor fame by building 80s renditions of pre-war luxury cars on modern GM platforms. These cars all had custom bodies akin to the Duesenbergs and Packards of the 1930s. So I guess Pontiac thought that if they could design those cars based on existing GM products, then they could probably do something with the new Firebird. As such, Pontiac commissioned an initial prototype to be built by Knudsen Automotive in 1984 based on the Firebird. And boy oh boy did they deliver something special. And this new high-performance Pontiac would be called the Tojan. Now, the brand new third-gen Firebirds, which hit the market 2 years earlier, already had a very modern look to them with their angular restyle. But Knudsen knew that this car needed to look considerably different than a stock Firebird to set it apart. So they turned every styling dial up to 11. And not necessarily in a good or a bad way. The Tojan featured significantly wider front fenders and quarter panels that looked very heavily inspired by period IMSA race cars and Ferraris alike. The Firebird's pop-up headlights remained, but the front fascia of the Tojan was redesigned to a smoother, more Italian-looking design, while the rear of the car got a new tail section and a redesigned rear hatch. To fill out the wheel arches, ultra-wide, dished gaudy wheels were fitted and wrapped with some giant tires as well. Overall, you could see the Firebird bones underneath, but the Tojan did look radically different from the outside. And speaking of radical, wait till you hear what was under the hood of this car. The L69 code 5-liter V8 under the hood of the fastest stock Firebirds in 1984 only made around 175 horsepower. Now, it doesn't take a math wizard to figure out that there was absolutely no way that engine was getting this car to 200 miles per hour. Knudsen knew that too, which is why they promptly pulled it from the car and threw it in the trash. They then phoned a friend to crack the power dilemma for their car, and that friend just so happened to be Gail Banks, who is an engineer, entrepreneur, and arguably one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to forced induction for engines. Banks worked to outfit a set of mammoth turbochargers to a new small block Chevy, which was pulled out of a boat. This twin-turbocharged, marine-based small block had fully forged internals and, with the turbos, made an apparent 800 horsepower on pump gas. In 1984, which is ridiculous. That is over 4 times the amount of power that came in this chassis to start with. And given 80s GM build quality, I'd argue that that is almost more concerning from a safety perspective than it was exciting. Thankfully though, the 200mph prototype did get an overhauled suspension setup to help wrangle the car through the corners with upgraded springs and better brakes. Still though, this was 80s tech and 80s rubber that were the only things standing between you and the on-off switch of the massive turbos under the hood. The prototype car had a 4-speed automatic transmission with an unknown rear gear ratio, but it had to be quite long because this 200mph prototype did a verified 206 mile-per-hour top speed run, besting the Ferrari F40 that would come a few years later. Oh, and this wasn't done on a high-speed test track or even a runway. Allegedly, this 206 mile-per-hour fun run was done on a sufficiently straight road in the middle of rural Nebraska. Like, what even is this car? Anyway though, the initial 200mph prototype was a maniacal machine, and you certifiably had to be nuts to take this car up to its acclaimed top speed with its questionable level of downforce. But nonetheless, Pontiac was impressed by the look and performance of the prototype. However, they thought as it sat, it was way too radical and way too expensive to be able to sell effectively to the public through their dealer network. And as a result, the tragic neutering of the 200mph began. Now on the exterior, the car visually remained pretty much the same as the prototype. The neutering was in the engine department. Gone was that glorious Banks turbocharged small block, and it was replaced with either the LB9 5-liter V8 or the L98 5.7-liter V8 from the Firebird, which made up to 245 horsepower. Thankfully though, an optional supercharger could be fitted to the 200mph courtesy of B&M to bring overall power closer towards the 400 horsepower mark. The 700R4 automatic transmission was standard on all the production versions of the 200mph. Inside of the car, it was still just a regular 3rd-gen Firebird at the end of the day, but it did get its own set of slick digital gauges, optional Recaro seats, and even oddly enough, a wood-grained dash if you wanted. And if you really wanted to spice your 200mph up, you could even get a Countach-style rear wing fitted on the back for that extra smidge of crazy. Depending on the options, the production versions of the Pontiac 200mph started at $22,000 in 1984 money and could go all the way up to around $55,000, which was still a ton at the time, but that was still $20,000 less than the base price of a Ferrari 308 GTS. The 200mph was, for all intents and purposes, Pontiac's attempt to outsource the creation of an American-made supercar for the blue-collar man. But without the 800 horsepower engine, that begs the question, how many people actually bought these cars? Well, estimates have it that there were around 150 Pontiac 200mph produced, which included a handful of convertibles and other special variants from 1985 to 1991. The 200mph is a super strange car that simply doesn't get any notoriety at all, which is why I'm making this video. Yes, obviously I agree that it's a shame we didn't get the full 800 horsepower version. But the fact that this car still even got made at all is pretty awesome. For the regular production version of the 200mph, they actually do come up for sale once in a blue moon, and they aren't all that expensive. Probably around 25 to 30 grand can get you one. So let me know in the comments down below, for 25 grand, would you take one of these super low production 200mph, or would you take a showroom quality WS6 3rd Gen Trans Am? Me personally, I would take one of these. But as always, thank you all for watching another video. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out. But otherwise, until next time, enthusiasts.